All right, now here's where I think the course starts to get pretty interesting. Um, what I have here is the returns for 10 different indexes. And this is provided at this website. They update it every year and they provide the last 20 years worth of returns. I'll also post a link to this on the module section. And it's just kind of interesting. I'm going to zoom in a little bit further so y'all can hopefully clearly see the numbers. But like oh, and by the way, they're also color coded and ranked. So the top row is the index that did the best. The bottom row is the index that did the worst that year, and you can see that sometimes an index will perform nicely for a few years in a row. So the S&P 500 Growth Index did quite well from 95 through 98. Then it dropped to third place, and then in 99, and then in 2000 it dropped to what, eighth place and ninth place, and it stayed in ninth place for 4 years in a row. And all of the indexes do that, not just the S&P 500 Growth. I only did that one because it was the top one for the first year that we're covering. So, um, this is the Standard& and Poor's 500, which they then split into the growth stocks and the value stocks. I don't know that you can see what I'm highlighting over here. I don't have a way to make it any better. The Russell 2000 is a broader index than the Russell 500. They also split the Russell 2000 into growth stocks and value stocks here in the lighter blue. They have two bond indexes. There's the Barclays Aggregate, which includes corporate, government, municipal bonds, and then the Barclays Corporate High Yield Index, which is only corporate bonds that are below investment grade. And then this is the Europe, Australasia, and the Far East Index. And then here's an emerging market index, which includes, I think like 16 or so different countries that have only emerging markets. And if you scroll to the second page of this document, it actually defines, actually, I can see it's 21 emerging countries. It defines all the indexes. But what I did is I took all this data for the past 20 years and I popped it into a spreadsheet. Oh, not that spreadsheet. This spreadsheet. Here we go. And I had originally alphabetized them, but for various reasons they're no longer alphabetized. But what I wanted to do was be able to look across a row and see how a specific index did. So this on the on the on this particular PDF, they're always organized by the top performer in the top row. And the top performer changes. Sometimes it's the Russell 2000 value, sometimes it's the MSCI Emerging Markets Index, sometimes it's the S&P 500 Growth Index, what have you. But here I just want to track how a particular index did. So I have the data for the Barclays aggregate for the past 20 years. And sometimes it generated a loss, sometimes it generated a gain. Same thing with the Europe, Australasia. That's a hard word for me to say. Uh, and the Far East Index. Sometimes it did great, and sometimes it did not do well at all. Actually, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so hopefully y'all can see this a little bit better. But so I'm tracking for each year how each index did. And then down here in purple, I've just averaged how all of the indexes did. So 2001 was not a good year, nor was 2002. On average, all of these indexes lost about 14%. If you had held an equally weighted portfolio, well, with 1/10 of your money in Barclays aggregate, 1/10 in the Europe, Australasia, Far East, 1/10 in the emerging markets, etc., because there's 10 different indexes here, you would have lost about 14%. But the next year, if you'd held 1/10 of your portfolio in those 10 indexes, you would have done great. And I mean, the interesting thing is, even though like 2002 was a bad year, it wasn't a bad year for everything. The Barclays Aggregate Bond Index did well. And even though 2008 was a horrible year, it wasn't horrible for the Barclays Aggregate. And then like 2011 was a negative year too, but there were quite a few that generated positive returns. So hopefully you can see that I'm alluding to something that I will eventually spell out. Chapter 8 is on asset allocation, how you decide how to put your money into different asset classes. So what I'm showing you is how these asset classes have performed over time and relative to each other. So here's if you'd put basically formed what I call an equally weighted portfolio, 1/10 in each. Here's how you would have done during those 20 years. And then I've also averaged everything. So this number, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more again in hopes that y'all can see everything. This number represents how you would have done had you put all of your money in the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index and never shifted it. So 100% in Barclays and kept it there for 20 years, you would have generated on an average 6.29%. If you put all of your money in the Russell 2000 value and never shifted it, so 100% in Russell 2000 value for 20 years, you would have earned 12.5%. But that's at a cost. It would have generated quite a bit of risk. And just kind of for fun, I'm going to come down here and say, well, oh, and actually what I'm also going to do just to so y'all can perhaps see it a little better and it'll help me too, I'm going to highlight these two in yellow. Here's the return, the Russell 2000 value generated. Here's the risk that it had. Here's the return the Barclays aggregate generated along with its risk. So you can see the Russell 2000 generated twice as much risk, and so I not risk return. I'm just going to take that 12.5 and I'm going to divide it by the 6.29. That's not what I'm after. I'm after this number. So when I said it generated twice as much risk, that's how I calculated that. It did it though at a hefty cost. It I hope I said that right. It generated twice as much return. I may have accidentally said risk, but I didn't mean to. The cost that you pay for this extra return is this extra risk. It has far more than just twice as much risk. So I can take this risk, divide it by the Barclays aggregate risk, the price that you pay, and I find it kind of frustrating Excel's doing that at the moment, is to generate twice as much return, you have to be willing to take a little bit more than 4 times as much risk. And that might be too risky for quite a few people. And then down here, I calculated the average return. So I'm going to color code these I guess in orange. So this 9.82% is the return you would have earned had you balanced your portfolio, put 1/10 in each of these 10 different indexes, and maintained that 1/10 proportion for 20 years. You would have earned about 10% at risk of about 17%. And I have graphed all of those, and I really hope y'all can see that. I don't know that I can actually I can zoom in a little bit. So, so this bottom axis represents risk, and the left axis over here is return. And so I'm gonna zoom in so y'all can see the words, hopefully. And so this dot right here. Oh, it's not showing me what I want. This I'll do this dot. This dot shows me the risk that I took from investing 100% in the MSCI emerging market countries. I would have earned a return of about 11.09% with risk of 33.7. I'm just going to pop back over here to show you where I got that. So that's this row right here, the emerging markets row. There's that 11.09 and the 33%. Oh, that's not very good because look over here. I could have put 100% of my money in the S&P 500 value and or even the S&P 500 altogether, and I would have earned a better return, 11.74 instead of 11.09 at by taking far less risk. So I can say that the S&P 500 dominates the MSCI emerging markets. And what I'm going to do is just so you can see that graphically, I'm going to put my cursor right here and then just draw a box directly north and west of the MSCI Emerging Markets Index. And any dots that fall in this blue box are better than the emerging markets, putting 100% of your money in emerging markets. So putting my money in the Russell 2000 would have been better because it would have generated a higher return at a lot less risk. Same with the Russell 2000 value, the S&P 500 value, and the S&P 500 growth. So we say that the emerging markets index in this particular case was dominated by all the ones that fell in the blue box. Let's check out the let's check out the Russell 2000 growth. So again, I'm just going to put the box here so it's a little easier for you to visualize it. I'm putting my cursor on the Russell 2000 growth, and then I'm just looking in the graph above the Russell 2000 growth dot and to the left of it. And I do see that dots fall in that blue box, which means those blue dots dominated the Russell 2000 growth. By that I mean they generated higher return with less risk, which is something we would all desire. So I'd much rather earn the return of the Russell 500 growth. It earned 12.26% compared to the Russell 2000 growth of 10.5, and not only that, it did it with risk of only 21.8 compared to risk of 23.9 for the Russell 2000 growth. So again, the S&P 500 growth dominates the Russell 2000 as do these three dots as well. The green dots I'll talk about in a bit. I also then said, well, how did my equally weighted portfolio do? Remember, I had tracked here in the purple, row 13, how much I would have earned if I'd put 1/10 or an equal weight in each of those 10 different indexes. And then here are the overall summary numbers for that equally weighted portfolio. Over the 20 years, I would have earned an average return of about 10% with a risk of about 17. That point is plotted right here in red. The equally weighted portfolio is not a dominant portfolio. Well, actually, I'm sorry, it is, which is nice. So I'm going to again insert my blue box just so I can look at it. At the moment, I don't want to discuss the green dots. I'll talk about them in a bit. So just look at the blue dots, which are which represent putting 100% of your money in the specific index that the blue dot is labeled with. So that equally weighted portfolio dominates all those blue dots. Sure, the S&P 500 generates a better return than the equally weighted portfolio, but it does so at a cost of higher risk. So that means it doesn't dominate it. To dominate the equally weighted portfolio, it has to generate a higher return with less risk. And there's no blue dot that does that. That's not necessarily always true. It just turned out to be the way it worked out for the past 20 years. The next thing I wanted to do was say, well, an equally weighted portfolio is really kind of naive. It's not necessarily the best way to weight your investments. So I wanted to show you how to possibly do that because again, chapter 8 is about asset allocation. How to decide how much weight to put in different asset classes. And I don't have all the asset classes here. Like this is large cap and giant cap stocks, and here they're also split into value and growth. I said those backwards. The Russell 2000 is considered a small cap index, And I mean, this is the Europe, Australasia, and the Far East. So, I mean, there are foreign stocks in here in emerging markets, but I don't necessarily have a small cap foreign market index in this list. But the reason I chose this list is just because that website conveniently provides me with that data. And I didn't want to research and find a small cap foreign index to pop in here. I'm just using the numbers from the what's called the Callan periodic table of investments. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it's not bad. I'm just using it to demonstrate ideas anyway.